Aloha and welcome to episode 8, I think it's 8, of our tutorials on Adobe Premiere. Today we're going to be moving into using titles. Alright, so let's take a look at what we've got so far. I have switched to a smaller monitor. Hopefully that makes this a little bit more easy to see on the screens that you're using. But we've got a series of spots here near the beginning. So, certainly putting a title screen for the entire project is not a bad idea. As Scott introduces himself, maybe we should put a lower third there with his name on it. And then might we even consider here, where we're looking at the close-ups of the different coffee beans, identifying them as a light roast, a medium roast, and a dark roast. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start with the lower third. I think that sounds like fun to begin with. There are really two steps to creating a title. The first one is simplicity itself. All you have to do is click on the Type tool over here in the toolbar. If you click and hold it, you'll see there are actually two, a regular Type tool or a vertical Type tool. I'm just going to hit the regular Type tool there. Now if I click anywhere in this window, you'll notice that my cursor has got a standard word processor looking icon. It'll open up a box and I can type Scott. His name is Magers, M-A-G-E-R-S. Okay. And now if I come back to my basic selection tool, I can click that and move it around on the screen. And that's literally all I can do right now, which, let's face it, this is not very impressive. I have to go over to the Graphics tab. So remember the workspaces at the top of the screen. I'm going to click on Graphics. And it is going to open up this Essential Graphics panel on the right-hand side. Now, this is where the magic happens. Now, at first, it's open to this Browse tab, and that's cool. It gives me a bunch of templates that I can play with. I'm not interested in doing templates at the moment. What I want to do is move over here to this Edit tab. Okay, and now we have the place where the magic happens. So I don't know if you noticed, but as soon as I clicked with that text tool on the screen and started typing, this appeared on the timeline, this little guy right here. So that's actually my title. If I were to delete that, everything goes away, right? So watch again. I'm going to click on my text tool, type tool, I'm sorry, they call it the type tool, and watch the timeline. I'm going to click in the window, and it automatically appears. And again, I'm going to type Scott Magers. All right. So looking at the controls I have over here on the Type tool, there's a bunch of stuff in terms of centering and alignment, in terms of positioning. Really for positioning, I like to just use my selection tool to click and drag. Okay. But as we move down into the bottom half, now we get into some useful stuff. I can choose my font. All right. So maybe I want to go with something that's a little more cartoonish. Or maybe that just looks silly, and rather than the cartoonish, I want to go to something, I don't know, just something clean. I learned the trade working on television back in the days of standard definition, and the rule of thumb was always you wanted it as simple as possible. No serifs, no scrollies, just a nice clean font. So I kind of migrate towards that. But you'll notice that I've got my choice of a bunch of fonts, and many of these have a sub-choice. I could make this oblique, which I guess means italic. Right here beside that choice, I've got a little slider that lets me resize the font. I can click and drag. Or if I click on this little number, I could just arbitrarily put in a font size. Let's try an 80-point font. Hey, that looks pretty good. All right. And then here you can see I can make it left justified or centered or right justified. For one line of text, it doesn't make just a whole lot of difference. So I'm going to take this and just move it down towards the bottom of the screen here. And then I've got a whole series of colors here. So right now I have the fill color turned on and it's set to white. Right? If I turn it off, well, you can see my text box looks empty now because I have a font that has no color. I'll turn that back on. Rather than white, I just click the little white square and it's going to open up my color picker here. I'm going to try and go for something that's kind of coffee colored. It's hard to do brown on a video screen. Okay, that doesn't read very well. The next one down, stroke, means outline. So I'm going to turn stroke on, and you see that I've got a white outline. I'm going to click on the color there. Sorry, it appeared off screen. And I am going to change that to black. And then here beside it, right now it's only a 1 point. I can click and drag and make that wider. Or I can just click in there and type in a number, like if I wanted it to be a 6 pixel. All right. That's working for me. Okay. So now I'm going to come back. Most lower thirds, you have a name and a title. All right. So I'm going to just click my text tool again. And I'm going to call him a coffee guru. Now notice it kept the same attributes as the last title, and maybe that's fine with me. I will, though, and notice here in the top right-hand corner, it's treated it as a new layer. If you've ever worked in Photoshop or InDesign, this will be familiar to you. If not, right, I can see that I've got Scott Majors selected. Right, so if I make any changes to that with like the size, for example, or I can come up here and click on Coffee Guru. And again, I can change that size. I want to make that a little bit smaller. And maybe I'll turn off the italics there. And then I can just drag this down and put it where I want it. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. You know what would really make this work for me is if there was a background behind it. So I'm going to do that now. Oddly enough, okay, there is a tool to draw a rectangle and there's a tool to draw an oval, but for some strange reason, they are not hidden where I would put them. I would put them under the type tool. Adobe did not do that. They are hidden here under the pen tool. Don't ask me. I am going to grab the rectangle tool, click on that. And then I'm just going to click and draw a rectangle, and I'm going to actually make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to start out here outside the window and drag it all the way across. All right, so I have I have drawn a gray rectangle. Not very impressive, is it? It's also blocking everything else out. But if we look here in this top part again, I can see there's my shape. There's my Coffee Guru, there's my Scott Majors. I can rearrange these. So just like I can rearrange layers in the video editing, I can rearrange layers here in the title. So I'm just going to grab that shape and drag it down to the bottom so it's underneath the two names. There we go. And my options on shape are a little bit different. I don't have any font, for example, obviously. But I do have a transparency fader here. So I'm going to bring that down about, I don't know. How about there? I like even numbers, so I'm going to type 40% in there. All right, so now I have created a title. Scott Majors, Coffee Guru. Having created it, if I want to go back and make changes to it, all I have to do is click on it so it's selected. And then I do have to be in the Graphics tab, right? So if I go back to my Effects tab, if I go back to the Editing tab, which is where I normally spend my time, I've now got this lower third that I created, and it's on the timeline. It's a piece of video now. I can move it, I can lengthen it, I can shorten it, I can use a razor blade to cut it into pieces so I could actually have the same title on there twice. I can do whatever I want with this thing. I can delete it, make it go bye-bye. So I'm going to put it near the start here.
Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen.
All right, that looks like a good place for it to start.
Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be talking about how to make the perfect cup of cappuccino.
I'm going to let it stay up until he finishes saying cappuccino, so I'm just going to click and drag it to my playhead.
Scott and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be talking about how to make the perfect cup of cappuccino. We'll start with...
Okay. It's not high art, but you get where I'm going with this. So if I wanted to do the light, medium, and dark roast, okay, I just have to do the same thing. It all starts by grabbing my text tool, my type tool, and clicking on the screen. I've got the playhead lined up here where that light roast appears. So I'm just going to click here and I'm going to type light roast. All right. it remembers the features that I use. So it's got the same font, it's got the same color, it's got the same outline, roughly even the same position of the last thing that I typed. And I'm going to grab my positioning tool and just pull that down to the bottom. Okay, that might be good enough for me, but you know what? I'm going to go back to the Graphics tab. And again, by default, when I open up the Essential Graphics panel here on the right, it goes to that stupid browser for the presets. That's not the word, the templates. That's what I was looking for. I'm going to go over to Edit. And then I'm actually going to make sure, just because I'm anal retentive that way, I'm going to click the Align Horizontally, the Center button here. So I centered it on the screen. There's no doubt in my mind now that's in the middle. And you know what? I don't actually like that color. I don't want a background on this one, so I'm going to take my color and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. I still want to try and keep within the coffee motif. Yeah, that's just ugly, isn't it? Maybe if we go a little more yellow. All right. Beautiful. So now I have created this, and it's far longer than it needs to be. Oops. All right, so you can see this guy here. So I want it to start where it says light roast and end where it says medium roast. Now, I'm going to do, end where it says, I want it to line up with the B-roll. So I'm going to use my razor blade to cut this. Let me zoom in a little bit just so I can see more clearly. Now I'm going to do something interesting. Rather than create a whole new title, I'm going to drag this title over so it lines up with the medium roast. And again, I'm going to use my razor blade to cut that. And I'm going to drag my title over here so it lines up with the dark roast. And I'm going to shorten that up. So now I've got a title for each of these. It's the wrong title, right? So light roast says light roast. The medium roast says light roast. The dark roast says light roast. But now that I've got it there, it's the right color, it's the right position, right? I click on this to select it. And then I can double click in that window and just change the word light to medium. And then I want to make sure that this is centered on the screen. And then likewise, I'm going to come over here to where it says dark, right? If I single click it, it opens up, so I know I'm editing the right one. I can also double click up here in this line that says light roast. It works the same as double clicking in the window. And I want to change this to dark roast. And again, I'm going to center that on the screen. So now I've got my three titles, and they all look the same. They've got the same font, the same color, the same size, and the same positioning, more or less.
We have a light roast, a medium roast, and a dark roast. So now that we've got our three roasts here.
All right. Now let's take a look at making an opening title. So I'm going to go to the beginning. The home key, by the way, will take you to the beginning of your timeline, and the end key will take you to the very end of it. If you need to jump back and forth, anytime you've got a playhead involved, home and end will take you to the extremes. So what I want to do here is I want to make a title, but I want it to be over black before the beginning of this thing. So let me zoom out, backslash, so I can see my whole window here. And I'm going to grab my entire project. I'm going to do this by hitting Command A, which is Apple for Select All. I could also just do a click and drag and lasso everything. But rather than that, I might accidentally miss something. I'll just hit Command A. And I'm just going to grab and slide this whole thing to the right. So I've got some empty space here to work with. Okay. So again, I'm just going to start here. I'm going to click my Type tool. And I'm going to call this and then I'm going to make a second box. I'm going to call it the perfect perfect cup. All right. And then down here at the bottom, I'm going to type with Scott. Okay. So I've got three different entries here. I've got one that just says the word the. I've got the words perfect cup, and then I've got with Scott. And I'm going to play around with these a little bit. So you know what, I'm going to leave that more or less alone. I'm just going to stick that up here towards the top of the screen. Perfect cup I want to play with a little bit. Let's see, I'm not crazy. Let's see if we can't make that font. Bold is nice. We'll make that a little bit bigger. I can also play with spacing here. I'm not crazy about the amount of space vertically that's between the two words. So this icon here, you can see that it looks like, they call it leading. Way back in ancient history when they used printing presses and they had type that was actually cast from the metal lead, they would put slivers of lead in between the rows of type, and that's how they would space the rows out vertically. So it's called leading. I'm just going to click and drag that. I want to make it a little bit smaller. The other thing I want to change, I'm going to turn this into a center justified text, and then I'm going to center that on the screen. And this one I want to make a nice bright, let's go with a bright yellow. And then Scott's name, we're actually going to make this pretty dull. Let's make this just a white font. And let's shrink it down quite a bit. Maybe not that much. Maybe somewhere in the 50 range. All right. Perfect cup I want centered on the screen vertically and horizontally. And I'm going to grab Scott and just kind of tuck him in the corner here. And I want to grab V and line it up there. All right. Oops. Okay, the perfect cup with Scott. I have created a title screen. You'll notice that it has appeared down here on my timeline. Let me zoom in a little bit. Oh, come on. There we go. So there's my title. And then I'm going to just delete this big empty space between it and the first video that I put in there a second ago. All right. So now we have our opening title.
Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be talking about how to make the perfect cup of cappuccino.
We have our lower third.
Filtered water.
And then we've got a series of labels for things. So we have our opening credit, we have a lower third, we have a couple of labels along the way. Another thing you might be interested in doing is a credit roll. So I'm going to jump to the end of my timeline, just hit end.
Yeah.
So right there where he turns and looks at the camera, that's where I want my credit roll to start, where my playhead is. So just like any other credit, I'm going to click the type tool and come in here and start typing. All right, I just want to get something on the screen. Okay. I'll clean that up in a second. I just want something to start working with here. All right, so at the moment I need to do something to change this, and it's a little bit counterintuitive because I've got all this selected, but what I need to do is come on the timeline, deselect everything, so I just clicked in an empty space, and then click on my title again. Now, because I don't have a layer selected, you'll see that I have these little options at the bottom here, including roll. I want this to be a credit roll, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And now you'll see that if I play it, the credits roll. So let's go in here and do some quick credits. So for credit rolls, I like to do a center aligned text, and I like to make sure it's centered on the screen. And this is a credit roll. It just needs to be simple. So I'm going to go to a white title. I'm going to leave the outline turned on. I'm going to change to a really boring font, maybe Courier. And let's shrink this way down, maybe 40. Okay. And then we just start typing. Perfect cup. Director, Tom G. Editor, Tom G. Camera. What was his name? Eric. Right. So you just work your way through here. All right, so this is a really short one, but you get the idea. All right, so now when I play this, there you have a credit roll. If you want it to go faster, and this is a little bit counterintuitive as well, if you're looking for a speed control, there is not a speed control. But to make it go faster, you just make the clip shorter. Or if you want it to go slower, oops. If you want it to go slower, you make the clip longer. So the rolling graphic tool in Premiere is a little bit on the primitive side. It's fine for short little projects. If you really want to do something fancy, though, something that looks like what you would see in a big budget Hollywood movie, this is not the tool for that. We can talk if you want about how to do that, but that's a much more complicated process, and it involves leaving Premiere for most of the work. Anyway, that should be enough about titles for you to get started here. In our next video, we're going to talk a little bit about adding transitions and how you can use that.